step forward.
Hello, everyone. We are back. This is the Then and Now podcast. We're doing another one of our point of interest discussions as far as the makeups of film or just anything else we're interested in. I think the first one we focused on dialogue within film. This one, we're going to be getting into the unsuccessful ending of trilogies and why a lot of trilogies that we've seen throughout film history have just, we feel like, haven't stuck the landing.
It's a weird phenomenon or epidemic, it seems like. Everything from, and we don't mean to offend anyone with the movies we talk about here. This is obviously opinion based, and we are speaking in generalities for some of these things. But say for example, I don't know, J.J. Abrams with Star Wars Episode 9.
Oh God, I knew you were talking about Star Wars.
And I didn't mean to go the right away, but I had to.
We just had a really great Star Wars discussion a day ago, and you go back to do this to me.
Not barely 24 hours ago. But the thing about it is that it's like why that particular dismount hurts so much is because it's so it's like so evident that there was no planning at all in advance for that kind of that film. It almost seems, I went back and watched The Last Jedi not too long ago, and it almost seems in a lot of ways like that should have been the ending of the trilogy right there. Like there's kind of a pretty definitive things you could have done ending right there in another sense. So it is bizarre. And I think that may be why trilogies or, the final film in a series oftentimes goes awry, is because they don't plan all three stories properly.
Yeah, the J.J. Abrams Star Wars in particular, I think, was a very special case in regards to the fact that they had to deal with just the toxic fan reception of a lot of certain plot points, and instead of standing fast on their decisions for plot standings, they decided to rewrite and backtrack on each movie going forward. Biggest thing being Rey not having a special bloodline or some divine fate that she was destined to do. It was supposed to be just she was a regular person that just happened to be very strong and happened to be the one that was the main character of the story. Then obviously the next movie on, they decided to make her literally a descendant of one of the strongest people to ever exist in Star Wars history, being Palpatine.
Well, not to make her a descendant of that, they had to resurrect him from the grave and say, it's like, where have you been? The movie opens with the dead speaker, something like that. It's like pretty much like they're saying, and he's back. Don't worry about actual having a reason or rationale behind it. He's just back. Get over it. Here we are. It's like, well, now you're treating us like we're dumb. You also mentioned the idea of having to try to walk back or doing some fan service or whatever nonsense it was. There was also the idea too that, Finn and Poe may have actually been in a relationship, or they may have actually wanted to be in a relationship together, and there are lots of fans that wanted that. And obviously they were worried about the ultra conservatives and people that wouldn't be in favor of an openly gay relationship in any capacity. So they made them, out of nowhere, they gave them both love interest, either one in the past for Poe or one that was aspiring for Finn. And it's kind of, this seems unnecessary. What are we doing here? And they also made Rey and what's his face? Kylo coming together. It's like, what are you doing? Stop this.
Even weirder with that. Well, the Finn thing in Poe, I saw some people saying that. I more so got the vibe that Finn and Rey were supposed to be a thing. And I think we've talked about it in the show before, to where I saw that even more so in the last movie, in which they did this weird thing in which they were sinking into the sand pit, and he said, "Hey, I had to tell you something before we die." I'm thinking in my head, it's "I love you." That's got to be the thing, because you're about to die. What else would you have to tell her in the last moments of you both being alive?
I know.
And then they just disregard that ever happening and going forward in their movie. It never.
There's no payoff. There's no payoff for that at all. Yeah.
That one I feel like was kind of race related with him, because even I think the Chinese posters, they had him completely taken off or completely shrunken, versus what they had in America or other. They were just really bad to him, to the point where he said he never wanted to come back.
Well, yeah, I know.
Extremely sad to me.
Well, it's also the same as with Kelly Marie Chan, the one who was Rose.
Yeah,
films she got all the amount of death threats and stuff she had to deal with. And again, this is a fictional movie world where we're dealing. I know I was trying to talk about the trilogies and how they these, but but all this is just to say that, like, your opening point, Dev, that the biggest problem was that Disney or the powers that be behind the Star Wars films were so reactionary to all the feedback, as opposed to having a plan in place and actually sticking to it. And I get that Carrie Fisher passed, which was a huge something they had to deal with. That's a problem. I get that, but they should have had somewhat of a kind of a story in place for these things. It's as opposed to say what you want about the prequels. It's clear that Lucas knew what he was doing for all three of them. He had one story in line and kept to it. These, it felt like it was three different cooks in one kitchen, and they were making three different meals, and then they try to serve them. It's like, what is this cuisine? What am I eating?
Right. And to bring things full circle in regards to sequels, I know we've been on the topic of Star Wars for a minute.
Yeah, we have. We apologize.
I personally will have a tendency to get on Star Wars for a long period of time.
Yeah.
But to bring that full circle, I think a lot of the issues when you said, going back to what you said in regards to people not having plans, I feel like with a lot of trilogies, I don't think they start as trilogies. I think the first movie was really well done, and it usually makes a lot of money. And then studios are like, well, we need more than one of these. So at that point, the writers have to shuck and jive to try to craft together two more movies in a trilogy to finish that up.
Right.
Prime example to me being the Nolan Batman movies. I doubt that Nolan knew he was doing three of those.
No, he didn't.
Or did he didn't? Okay.
He did not. No, he planned for Batman Begins, and then they said, hey, we want more. They want like two more of these, and he pretty much was like, okay, well, it's to be one for you, one for me. So I will do these, but I want to have my Inception movie made between them. And then also he planned to have Heath Ledger in the third film as the Joker, and then that went obviously once Heath passed, that changed things too. So it kind of was, like you said, it wasn't originally planned. Then they did say we want two more, and he kind of had a plan in place, and then that plan got shattered because of Heath's passing. So.
And those movies to me are the perfect example of the formula that a lot of these trilogies go under. It's the first movie, which is usually the origin establishing movie that takes the main character, the protagonist, or the world, or whatever you're trying to establish. And usually those aren't always the best ones. Usually those are the decent ones that are setting up everything and establishing these characters. And then the second movies are when they usually go into either the character's progression in regards to a new character being introduced, whether that be a villain or otherwise. And those are usually the ones that shine the brightest and that validate the sequel or the desire for a sequel. That being the Heath Ledger Joker, that being Spider-Man 2, things like that, to where those just do extremely well. And then from there, it's like, well, we can't not do another one now. We've seen how successful the second one was and how much better it got. We have to do a third one. And that third one, it's once you hit that peak, it's extremely hard to stick landings.
It's bizarre how that continues to happen. Like, you're right. It's pretty much like it peaks in the middle. Like the first one is good. Second one is great. Third one is mediocre or bad. And there's so many trilogies off the top of my head I can mention that I can rattle off. I mean, like Back to the Future, in my opinion, the first one's the best, but the second one is watchable enough. But the third one, it's like, it kind of feels like I said, it doesn't exactly know what it wanted to be. And I know for a fact they didn't plan for a trilogy either. They planned just for one movie. Same thing with like
Men in Black.
Well, Men in Black, I mean, the second one's kind of rough too. They definitely, but that's saying, they didn't plan for a trilogy there either. And so the second two films are kind of, second and third are kind of rough. Shrek 1 is great.
Yeah.
But Shrek 2 is the greatest. And then Shrek 3 is like, what are we doing here? And I know they didn't plan for a trilogy either. Kung Fu Panda 1 and 2 are very good. 3 is okay. It's not terrible. It's still not in the same ballpark as the other two.
Cars for me too.
Oh, Cars. Yeah, say Cars. So I think you're right though, is that they don't, part of why these quote unquote trilogies don't land is because they weren't meant to be trilogies. I think that's why Lord of the Rings does. I know you're not you haven't watched all of them, not the biggest fan of that necessarily, but that trilogy is well regarded because it was set up initially from the jump to be a trilogy. They literally filmed all of them at the same time. It's based off a book that has all these stories done. That's why it works. So yeah, there are ways that
even going into gaming, when it comes to like the Assassin's Creed series, right? The best arc within the Assassin's Creed franchise undoubtedly is the Ezio trilogy. And that's because they wrote his story, like his entire arc, within 2, Brotherhood and Revelations, from him being young to him getting a little bit older to him coming to the end of his life. And then after that, when they try to stretch just the Assassin's Creed story out more, they just didn't know where to go. Granted, I understand with a gaming franchise, you have the ability to go to other characters and build them up, but I don't think the same attention to details of the creation of these characters was given in regards to Ezio. It felt like they perfectly crafted all 3 of his games. And for that one, I can't say for sure if they planned out all 3 of those games ahead of time, but it felt like those 3 games had a cohesive story that was planned out for that character specifically.
Right. And it may have been. I think odds are, because they came out in pretty rapid succession. Odds is that's Ubisoft, right?
Ubisoft, yeah.
Odds are Ubisoft, in the world of gaming, you more or less, when you find a bankable franchise, you want to kind of milk it. So they may have said, yeah, we want to do these as many as we possibly can, and they may have deliberately hired writers that could do that. I know, for example, with the Uncharted series, Amy Hennig, the person who was on for the board for the first 3, she had a story in mind and she brought it to life, and they still carried out the story up to episode 4, or the 4th game. And all 4 games actually are well regarded. They all have very interesting stories. However, even with that, the first game that Hennig and her team worked on, it was just the first game. There was no, it was never meant to be a trilogy or more than one game. So that's what you're saying. Your hypothesis is, again, proving true, proving right. So it's I think it's almost like you don't know how. Part of what happens with stories is you want to find a way or to top yourself, or to kind of outdo what you did before. You feel like you have to go bigger and better each time. And after a while, you don't know how to get bigger and better. In the Spider-Man, the Raimi Spider-Man trilogy, they had, I'm not the biggest fan of the first film, but it did really well. I do love the second film, and they had an amazing villain in Doc Ock. So what they do in the third time around, they put 3 villains in the same movie. Had a lot more spectacle with Sandman. They brought Venom in there, even though Raimi didn't like him. And they also had Harry doing with his stuff. It's like, it's too much stuff. You're trying to go bigger and better, and you're kind of losing the main point of what people wanted to see. So
a question I would have for you, obviously you are a writer who is somewhat accomplished and has written multiple stories now. This is more so getting into what a lot of these people go through, a lot of the writers go through within these projects. How difficult would you think it would be to write an entire story, almost akin to Akira Toriyama, where you write a story for a character and you end his arc, like you have a definite ending in your mind of where he ends, and then you're forced to not only continue that person's story, but to write X amount of sequels to that person's story going forward? How difficult do you think that would be, in your opinion, to do so?
To quote Stephen King, when a reporter asked him if writing was hard, it's not hard. It's really fucking hard. Because basically what you're trying to do is you're saying this. Imagine it from this perspective. If you put all your energy and effort into a singular goal, like you actually know this is the actual destination you have, like you know that you need just as much gas to get your car over this hill, you have just enough food for you guys to survive for this weekend. Right. You have all these things planned out specifically just to do this one mission, and then someone's like, cool, but we need you to go another 10 miles, and we need you to stay there for another week. It's like, I didn't plan for that. I don't know how to do that. You're breaking my brain. How am I going to do this? You're breaking my brain. It can be done, sure, but it's very, very difficult. And I think you bring up a good point by saying, like, how hard is it if you have a definitive end in your mind as a creator, writer, director, whatever it is, and then they're like, well, now we need you to do a lot more. It's like, I don't have more. I'm done. My story's over.
And that's something I have an issue with. I've had a conversation with my gym buddy recently. He obviously isn't the biggest fan of Dragon Ball or the Dragon Ball series and doesn't really like it too much. He obviously believes it falls off at the Buu Saga, which a lot of people do.
He obviously doesn't like Dragon Ball. It's like, why do you really like Dragon Ball? But yeah,
a lot of people don't. I think, well, this is a side tangent. I think a lot of people are at a point now where we have so many well done anime like a JJK, like a My Hero, that they look back on a lot of the earlier anime that helped pave the way and kind of look down on them because they're not at the same quality of writing that these current anime are. Granted,
sure,
that those original anime kind of had to pave the way and show what not to do for these other anime to do those things and exceed. But that's a whole conversation for another day. We can use that for a different topic. But obviously, he had a lot of issues with the Buu saga, and what I brought up in discussion point was Akira Toriyama did not even want to do that. Like, the difficulty in, like you said, taking a definitive end in your mind and then extending that forward into a whole new arc now. And we already know how much he packs into an arc. It's, you want me to replicate what I've done in the past with the story of a character that I already had done and wanted to leave it there. And it's one thing to say that because he had to bring the story of Dragon Ball back to life. And I'm guessing in his mind, all right, Gohan's a new main character. I can just write from Gohan. That's at least easier because he has some more growing to do as he's a kid. But the studio, they're going to be like, no, everybody loves Goku. We got to bring Goku back and continue to make him the main character, main protagonist. Now we have to bring Goku back to life and do this story arc with him where I've developed him and fully, like, the development I have planned for this character is completely done and finished, and I had him die, and that was the definite resolution. But now I have to pull some more development out of my ass. Like, what else can I bring up with him to develop? And I think that's where you see a lot of plot holes not even plot holes, but just a lot of holes in the character of Goku, where he seems like he's been the same character since the Cell Saga, in a sense. He's gotten more power-ups and found different villains that have pushed him past his physical limits. But as a character, it doesn't feel like he's developed anymore. Like, he has the same desires, the same motivations, the same modus operandi that pushed him throughout the entire series up until that point. He's got literally like a new coat of paint, being the different color hair he gets from the Super Saiyan transformations.
Right, yeah, a new coat of paint, a new coat of a hair dye. But so there's a couple of things that are interesting there, what you said. The first thing is, I guess the last point first, Goku was never meant to really grow. He's a flat arc character. I think we talked about this before on the show. He literally doesn't change from the start of Dragon Ball. He pretty much has the same personality. The people around him change and grow because of him, because of his enthusiasm and things of that nature. Goku gets stronger, yes, but his personality doesn't change, which essentially he doesn't have an arc. He's not trying to. His goal is never to grow as far as getting smarter or wiser or understanding how to do with his family better or be a better father. None of that stuff happens. Vegeta is the character that has an arc. He actually has a couple of arcs, and he actually does change by the end of Dragon Ball Z, essentially. And if you actually do watch the show, you see Vegeta go from being a straight up villain to being someone who's willing to give his life multiple times, multiple ways to save his family and to save the world. But Goku, that's pretty much the same thing. The other thing is that I know that Akira Toriyama obviously wanted out of Dragon Ball a while back, and they kind of wanted him to keep going back and doing more. And the whole idea with Gohan was, because I think the original idea was the Cell Saga was meant to be kind of the end of the story in a sense, and that was meant to be the goodbye for Goku. And then Gohan was only meant to be a temporary leader. And as Akira Toriyama was writing the story with Gohan, he's like, this guy, Gohan doesn't have the heart to be what Goku was, because he's not Goku. It's a different kind of character. So Toriyama realized it himself while he was writing. It's like, I can't make Gohan work. I just can't do it. I have to have someone, and pretty much I have to bring Goku back in order for the story to keep going. And the whole idea was, like you said, he didn't necessarily plan to have any more sagas. It was, the Buu saga wasn't supposed to actually happen, really. So if you plan for a dismount as a writer, creator, director, what have you, and you are forced to extend it, that's a good reason as to why things will fall apart. That's a good reason as to why a trilogy is oftentimes going to fumble. Now, let me ask you this question, Dev. As we're approaching the release very, very soon, I think it's tomorrow, the release of God of War Ragnarok, the video game. That's a game, I think this will be the second installment in this particular saga, with Kratos as a father and having a son. You know, I just said the same thing twice. But I believe this game might be the end of that saga, of that two-parter. I don't know definitively, but how do you think it'll play out, having this as the dismount of that saga?
So this is very interesting. I'm glad you brought this up. It was something I was going to say for the actual I said Dragon Ball, still on that. For the actual God of War discussions we were going to have around the game. I'm very interested to see what happens. I'm not sure.
Mhm.
Obviously, the first Kratos doesn't really. He gets some from. I think he's kind of like Goku in a sense. Granted, I'd argue the discussion you had on Goku that I guess I argue he develops and grows in some aspects, but that's a conversation for another day. But I think Kratos is actually what you more so would call kind of a flat character in like the first bunch of games, at least prior to the PS4 games, where he kind of just seems like the same person as he's just rage revenge monster. He's just finding new ways to come back and fight through it. And that was very much so changed within the PS4 not remake but the sequel, in which he's going along this journey of coming to peace of his past actions and becoming a better father. And that was an amazing arc to follow because it's something completely different from that character. And knowing his past history, we saw just how difficult that journey of development was with that character, even more so with the development of his young son along with that, discovering who they were. Going forward, I don't even know, because at this point, it feels like a lot of the issues Kratos and Atreus had with each other, as far as Kratos being honest with him, as far as Atreus kind of growing up and becoming more of not a man yet, obviously, but more of just a established person that's aware of who they are and what they are and where they come from. It seemed like everything had been resolved by the end of that first game, like releasing Freya, I think it was his mother's name. Yeah, releasing Freya's ashes.
No, Freya wasn't. Freya's the
mom. Okay,
the mom for the other.
Baldur's mom. I'm tripping.
Yeah.
I can't remember what did they ever say what.
I don't think they say Atreus' mom's name. I don't think so.
I'll look it up later and I'll probably put it in a video and edits. But when they released her ashes at the top of the mountain, that felt really finite. Like a finale to me. It felt like it was the ending of that whole arc. So once they revealed the Ragnarok thing, obviously Ragnarok being the apocalypse and being the end of everything, I'm finding difficulty trying to guess what that arc would be. I can make speculations as far as maybe Atreus goes through another big development of now he knows who he is. Now he's having difficulty maybe learning his place or understanding where he fits in the world now that he knows what he is, possibly. And maybe Kratos trying to help him understand what it is to be a god now that he knows he is one. But even then, that seems it's doable, and I feel like it would work, but it seems so flimsy in comparison to the solid development we got in the last game that just seemed so relatable. The god journey to me just won't feel as strong because it's not as relatable, obviously, with us being mortal people. And then two, we feel like it's like dealing with rich people problems. Like we can empathize with their struggle, but we won't really ever sympathize with it because we don't have that struggle.
Yeah, and that's a fair point. It's basically it's starting from square one. And again, as far as you'd have to give the characters just as compelling, if not more, a more compelling arc throughout the game, because they did have a very, even though if you think about the plot of that last God of War game, it's simple. It's just them getting Kratos' wife and Atreus' mother's ashes from point A to point B. Everything and then some happens on that road trip, but that's all it is. And the mother deliberately wanted them to go on that road trip because she knew it would bring them together, because she knew that they were kind of estranged in a way. So now that they are a more cohesive unit, I guess the next thing will be to see what adventure they go on to as father and son together, as opposed to a journey bringing them together. And I don't know what it would be. Like you said, it'd probably be something involving gods or whatnot, or them being gods, what have you. But I'm hopeful. I mean, I saw the game's getting good reviews and stuff, but who knows? Who knows how it plays out? Another game. I know we're really long here, but I'll keep it real short. Another game that I feel kind of fumbled, that had a massive following for the first game, was The Last of Us. And my own
hold on, careful with this one, because I still haven't played the second one quite yet.
We won't get too far into the details, but basically everything that worked about the first one, as far as the arc between the characters, in a similar vein to Atreus and Kratos, with a paternal figure and a child coming together, that's in The Last of Us, is in a lot of ways dissipated in this sequel. And it's almost when you backtrack or reverse all that progress, it's obviously gonna upset fans, upset people. Like you don't want to undo what you've done in a sense. And I'm trying to be vague here with the details, but I think when sequels do that, it can upset people. Think about it. We're talking about arcs. If you have a character go on a massive journey and learn all kinds of things and get to a new place in their life, and then you start the second film or second game or second story off with them being right back where they were at the very beginning of the last movie or last game or have you, it's like, what's the point of this? What are we doing, guys? So
I get that. I was gonna get on that point specifically, as far as like you said, in the second installment or just a sequel installment, if you make the character just kind of, like you said, start over from the beginning, it makes everything prior to that seem for naught. Where what was the point of going through all that struggle and strife when we're just going to be right back at the start?
Yeah.
And I think that's where something like the Dark Knight does well, where through Batman Begins, you go through a lot of the difficulties that Bruce Wayne had of becoming the Batman and learning how to be that person. And then he's acquired all those skills. Now the new issue is he's the Batman and he has all this strength, but now he's dealing with his relationship with the city he's protecting now. So you're adding in a new dynamic where it's not just the Batman. The Batman's established. The Batman's strength and skills are unmatched, and that's never going anywhere. Right. But the difficulty lies in the relationship with the people and the city that he's meant to protect, and how they view him and how they view themselves. And then you add in the Joker there to put a mirror to Batman to show him, not even a mirror, just kind of just demonstrating to Batman and kind of pointing him in the direction of like, hey, the city isn't what you think it is. The city is chaotic in nature. Like, human beings, given opportunity, will do horrible things to each other if forced to do so. And he just served as, I guess, like not like John Doe in Seven. As far as we talked about him being the embodiment of the city, this more so felt like a chaotic,
lawful chaotic, pretty much. Yeah.
Essentially, yeah, where he's just there to point out the hypocrisy in certain things, or
I'm sorry, chaotic neutral. I'm sorry, chaotic neutral. Sorry about that.
Exactly. That's what he felt like in that movie. And I think with a lot of other sequels or trilogies, that's where like again, this is a really long-winded and 30-minute
yeah, we've gone everywhere.
But I think to kind of have to wrap it up and have a finality to it, I think the issue is these movies do not try to innovate and add in a new struggle that's unique to that film. It's always in relation to a previous film. It's always starting over from scratch and having to work your way up to a new power boost or a new skill set or a new weapon or something of some nature, or just a new villain who may possibly be a carbon copy of the previous villain. I think in order to do a sequel right in any fashion, rather it be second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, you have to add in a new difficulty or a new problem that isn't just a copy of the past one. Right. And sometimes for two movies, you can have it to where that problem spans two movies. I'm perfectly fine with that. Something like the Harry Potter movies and how they broke that up into part 1 and part 2. I'm fine with that, because at least that struggle is a continuation and it's a different part of the struggle. And it doesn't just feel like the same thing in the past struggle. But that's at least my personal solution for sequels and landing that trilogy. Having a new problem that is unique to that film and ending it and navigating it through a special way and having a sense of finality to it. Do not leave those trilogies open to a sequel for me personally. If people want to do a reboot later on, I'm not against that, trying to reboot something for a future generation. But if you're a writer or you're a director of your own creation and your own story, you have to have some sense of finality to it and make it feel like I was on this journey with this character or these people or whatever else.
Right. That makes perfect sense. Yeah, it makes perfect sense. And I'll go the other direction as far as if possible, try to have a plan in place for the story. The Matrix trilogy, it's 4 movie films now, but originally the Matrix trilogy, it was never meant to be a trilogy. You can tell that too. But they did plan on doing the 2 follow-up films, more or less. They had some kind of plan for that. it's not executed well, but I get what they're going for. It's the idea of one long journey for Neo, essentially, and from him to go from point A to point B by the end of the trilogy, in a sense. For him to find out what his purpose is, what they've said is that the whole idea that is that it's first film's about birth, second film's about life, and the third film's about death in some capacity. So if you actually can find a theme and have it carry over for all three of your films or your whole story, kudos to you. If you can't, and you want to actually, like you said, Dev, actually have it where in each film the character has to have a new and equally compelling journey that they must go on, that works too. But don't try to rehash the same idea in a different way, because odds are you'll fail.
All right. And yeah, man, that was a great discussion. I have fun with these. Again, I'm loving these types of videos and recording these. So if you guys are enjoying these, let us know and give us potential topics you want to hear about and want us to discuss going forward in the future.
Definitely chime in about what you want us to talk about.
Because we can have our own personal bias topics we want to talk about all day, 100%. But it would be really fun to hear from the audience what they would want to hear from and hear about. And in
your feedback, what's your take on things? What do you think about sequels? Do you think we're completely off base? Do you like the sequels that we don't? Do you dislike the sequels that we do like? Just let us know.
Yeah. But again, this has been Charlie and Ethan of the Then and Now podcast. Thank you guys for tuning in. We appreciate your support. We hope for your continued support, and we will see you guys next time. Peace.